I want to talk to Glenn calling in from Pennsylvania. Glenn, what's going on?
Oh, not too much. How about with you?
Going good. Somebody just donated $1,000. I'm pretty happy about that.
That's awesome.
So how can we help you, Glenn?
Good. Yeah, sure. I wanted to ask Matt that I have often heard him refer to promoting positive atheism, but when you look up the definition, it really means the opposite of what he seems to promote.
Really? So
yes.
when I joined the atheist community of Austin, the intro for the show included a line, let's see, welcome to the atheist experience, but it included promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. I have changed that language quite a bit to where now I talk about the separation of religion and government. But I asked the question when I first joined the ACA, what do we mean by positive atheism? Because there's two different usages. One, positive atheism would be affirming atheism, which some people might view as strong or hard atheism in the philosophic sense. And the other connotation is putting a positive light on atheism. Which one do you think is the right definition that I'm doing the opposite of?
Well, I just look up the definition, and the first one's what I saw, but I understood that's what you meant. I just wanted to make sure that you were just using it the way that I thought you were, which was the second one.
Well, my argument, because the answer that I got was that we mean both in the ACA. And so when I talk about positive atheism, I both mean representing atheism in a positive sense, which I think the ACA does by, even if things get contentious, it doesn't mean you're not going to bump heads over stuff. It is, hey, we're going to present a positive light. But also, I have no problem defending the notion of strong or hard atheism in the sense that positive atheism, as opposed to not just, I don't have a belief in a God, but I actively believe that there aren't any gods. The biggest issue, though, is that the best way to do that is to place the burden of proof where it should be and to point that out. And so if somebody wanted me to say, make a case for the fact that there isn't any God, the first question I have to ask is, okay, which God are we talking about? And this gets back to what Dan and I were just talking about with atheism.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I can only address the God proposition that a caller is presenting. But if we were talking about like a generic, the God of classical theism, or the God of, there's not one God of Christianity, there's a bunch of different Christian versions of God. But for all of those gods that people think that God exists, that God, you can have a reasonable justification in believing in that God, and that God wants you to know that he exists, I would argue that the argument from divine hiddenness disproves that God and all of those gods kind of clearly. So what I need is for somebody to define a God in such a way that I can argue for why either I don't believe that God exists or I believe that God doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's different for different gods.
Yep. And just I mean, I know we just had this conversation, but like introducing myself to people with this idea, I do use the atheist thing because when I say I'm an atheist, people do have assumptions about what that means that I don't necessarily attribute to. Right. And so like, atheism, while Matt has an idea of it and I have an idea of it and other people at the atheist community of Austin of it, they might be similar, but they might be, philosophically distinct in certain ways that gets lost in kind of a general conversations and stuff as well. So until you ask what somebody means by their words, you shouldn't make any assumptions, but
because it's really a huge mistake. And I've talked about this before. I came from a Southern Baptist background and I don't know a lot about Catholicism, but I had family members that were Catholic. I did a video just this past month called Skeptical of Catholicism, touching on this a little bit. But I watch people who were raised Catholic, and so all they know are Catholic doctrines, and they'll sit down and they'll argue with, a Presbyterian and talk about, well, it's just silly of you to believe that the cracker literally turns into the body of Jesus, when it's Catholics that believe that, and not all Catholics, but predominantly as doctrine. Baptists don't believe that at all. It's an absurd thing to believe. But if you go after a Catholic for what a Baptist believes or a Baptist for what a Catholic believes, they get to ignore and dismiss you. So the reason that you don't hear us quite often arguing specifically against the existence of a God is because the first thing we've got to do is establish what God somebody's talking about. And as unfortunate as it is, most of the people who are calling in haven't given this stuff enough thought to even be able to define what they're talking about. And they continually refuse to answer the simplest of questions that would allow us to get to that point. I'll present the argument from divine hiddenness for most gods, and it'll work fine. It's just, if we did it every week, no, there'd be no show.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of be boring, but you know,
I hope that clears it up for you, Glenn.
Yeah. What do you think, Glenn?
Yes, I appreciate it. Yep. Thank you very much. I appreciate it a lot.
Cool.
Absolutely.
All right. Got that solved. You ever feel like, Matt, when we do these shows, do you ever feel like we're like caseworkers for like a company where like people are coming with their IT issues and we're just solving it for them?
Sometimes there are some complaints that are, sorry, I have to put lotion on my head because it's too sexy. And so I got to tone it down a little bit. No, there are times when it's great to hear complaints, concerns, feedback from people, because it lets you know what point wasn't clear. And in my case, where I've done this atheist experience for 16 plus years now, it's always a little surprising to me what isn't clear. Now, it's clear for some people and it's not clear for others. But I love having the different conversations, and I love the different shows, because the tone and the calls on your show are going to be different than they are on Talk Heathen or Atheist Experience, or definitely different from Secular Sexuality.
Yeah, I think, and I defined atheist when I was a Christian as like someone who like only believed in science. I think that was like the word choice I used, because I talked about it in my video with Anthony. I do remember saying that, and I look at that now and I'm like, man, that's quite a definition that I would not use today. But I also didn't actually know really a whole lot of atheists or what that community looked like, and so that was ignorance on my part too. So again, we're talking a lot about reasons why we do this stuff, but like having people actually know somebody with these labels and stuff and having them explain themselves is going to be way more impactful, because like when you put a face to it, it means something different than just hearing somebody talking shit at a church sermon about what atheists are. So which is, most people's experiences with atheists, at least in the United States, I would wager, or at least a lot of people's experiences.
Early on, I remember, I'll keep this short. Sundays at church, people would fill out the visitor's card, and on Mondays, many of the church members would volunteer to go out and visit with the people who dropped off the visitor card. They write down their address, and typically you would go to their home and you'd knock on the door and you say, "Hi, we're from First Baptist Church of Harvest. You're here. You visited us on Sunday and you filled out your visitor card. We just wanted to come by and sit with you." And some of them would invite you in. You'd sit down. You'd talk about what they believed. Mostly you were talking to other believers. But on a few rare occasions, you'd run against some people that were like, "I really don't know what I believe. I just wanted to go visit a church." And it never occurred to me growing up that those people were atheists. Because to me, in my head, atheists were evil, Madeline Murray O'Hare. They were trying to destroy God's country. They wanted to, ruin everything, and they were working for Satan. That's what an atheist was in my head, not just someone who didn't believe. People who didn't believe were lost. They weren't atheists.
Right. Yes. There was something, that was another thing too. I had this idea, and I'll keep this short too, because we want to get some more calls, but like, I definitely had this idea that if you were an atheist, like there was something emotionally wrong with you. I definitely 100% thought that. And I remember the first time my friend came out to me as atheist in middle school, I assumed it was because he was having trouble with his family at home. And I regret that. I don't know where he's at today. And I wish I could, I don't know if I ever explicitly told him that was my thoughts, but I know that kind of thinking must have had an impact on my friendship with him, because how, our prejudices about people obviously affect our interactions with people. And so obviously, we experience that when we talk about this stuff all the time as open atheists. But like, again, it's just another reason why to, keep a smile on your face when talking about this stuff sometimes, because I'd rather people think nice things about us than continue to, actively discriminate, which is really awful.